Captain Emily "Ghost Rider" Lawson ran through the checklist with the precision of a surgeon. Flight 782 was supposed to be routine, a simple Denver to Chicago run, a standard 737, calm skies, hundreds of passengers settling into their seats, screens flickering with safety videos, murmurs of pre-flight chatter. She smiled faintly at the thought that today, everything would be ordinary. That was what made it so perfect for hiding a secret life she had left behind years ago, the life that had earned her the call sign, Ghost Rider. No one on board suspected that beneath the commercial pilot uniform lurked a combat-hardened Air Force veteran who had flown missions that most people could barely imagine. The cabin smelled faintly of coffee and antiseptic, punctuated by the occasional whiff of leather and perfume. Emily's co-pilot, First Officer Mark Dawson, chatted casually, nervously trying to shake off the early morning jitters. Emily's eyes scanned the cockpit instruments, noting every flicker, every gauge reading, committing them to memory. She had an innate sense for the heartbeat of a plane. If anything was off, she'd feel it before the instruments did. Today, though, everything seemed normal, too normal. The passengers were oblivious to the storm about to erupt. A family of 4 clambered into their seats, the mother wrangling 2 restless children, while a businessman tapped at his laptop with one eye on the window. Flight attendants did final checks, adjusting straps and smoothing down uniforms. The safety video concluded, and the engines roared to life, a comforting vibration beneath Emily's fingertips. Denver's sun glinted off the wing as the plane rolled toward the runway, the mountains gleaming in the distance. Clear for takeoff, the tower crackled. Emily pushed forward and the plane accelerated with a satisfying surge. The earth dropped away beneath them. Passengers murmured in delight or relief, unaware that their day was about to spiral into a nightmare. Emily felt the familiar thrill of flight, the rush of power that came with mastery. But then, almost imperceptibly, a vibration ran through the fuselage. Her eyes flicked to the instruments. It started as a flicker, a subtle, almost casual alert. She frowned, then it intensified, lights blinked red, the engines groaned. "Mark," she said sharply, her voice calm but urgent, "check engine 1." Dawson's brow furrowed as he followed her gaze. "It's reading 0." Emily's stomach tightened. Engine 1 was dead, not just underperforming, dead. Her mind raced. Engine 2 was still running, but she didn't take her eyes off the gauges. Seconds later, it faltered. The plane shuddered violently, throwing both pilots against their harnesses. Oxygen masks dropped in the cabin with a metallic clunk, startling passengers. Panic rippled like electricity through the cabin. A mother clutched her child. A man whispered a prayer under his breath. The roar of the engines had vanished, replaced by an eerie silence and the faint whine of hydraulics struggling to compensate. Emily's heart raced, but she kept her hands steady, fingers brushing each control like a pianist on keys. "This is not happening," Dawson muttered, but Emily only shook her head. There was no time for disbelief. She tapped her radio, scanning emergency channels, nothing. The mountains loomed closer, jagged peaks reaching up like angry fingers. She felt the tug of gravity, the subtle pull of panic as the plane lost altitude. Emily drew a deep breath. Years of Air Force training surged through her mind, the drills, the emergency maneuvers, the countless hours in simulators and real combat missions. She could not fail, not today. She would not fail. And yet, as she glanced at the cabin through the cockpit window, fear swelled in her chest. Hundreds of lives were in her hands. "Brace for impact," she instructed the cabin crew, voice calm but firm. "Prepare the passengers." The flight attendants went into action, checking seatbelts, reinforcing calm even as terror threaded their expressions. Emily's gaze swept the sky through the windshield. That's when she noticed it, a movement outside the clouds. Shadows, fast-moving and precise, something no commercial airliner should see at 30,000 feet. Jets. Military jets. Her pulse quickened, but she didn't flinch. This was no longer just a mechanical failure. Something more was watching, evaluating, waiting. Emily instinctively performed a rapid assessment. The F-22s, she recognized them instantly. Sleek, lethal, cutting through the sky, but they were not here for her, she realized with a cold shiver. They were here to watch, perhaps to test, perhaps to observe. And Emily's mind raced. Why now? Why her? Below, the jagged peaks of the Rockies presented an impossible obstacle course. She scanned the instruments, noting speed, angle, and altitude. She calculated a trajectory toward a narrow valley where the river cut through the mountains, her only possible lifeline. If she misjudged, even slightly, the aircraft would be torn apart. Passengers clutched each other. A woman's whispered scream was swallowed by the roar of the wind outside the fuselage. Emily gritted her teeth, remembering the mantra she had drilled into herself over years of combat missions. Control what you can. Adapt to what you cannot. She flipped switches, toggled flaps, adjusted throttle. The plane shuddered violently again. Dawson held on for dear life. Emily's knuckles whitened on the yoke. The aircraft responded, but barely. Trees flashed past below, a blur of green and brown, a reminder that the river she aimed for was no wider than a football field in some places. One wrong move and all would be lost. Emily's mind split between calculations, instincts, and the screams of passengers behind her. She could feel their fear, a living thing pressing against the cockpit doors. Her jaw clenched. She was no longer just a pilot. She was a guardian, a shepherd leading her flock through a storm of mechanical failure, gravity, and unknown observers in the sky. And then she saw it, a narrow opening in the valley, the river glinting like silver in the early morning light. Her hands moved with fluid precision, muscles remembering maneuvers that civilians could never dream of. The plane dipped, banks, descends. The trees rushed past, scratching at the wings. Time seemed to stretch, the moments elongated into a terrifying eternity. Passengers gasped as the aircraft bounced against the river's surface, water spraying into the fuselage. Emily's heart hammered. Every second mattered. Every breath mattered. She had to land, had to survive, not just for herself, but for the 155 souls depending on her. And just as the plane touched down with a violent shudder, Emily glimpsed movement above. A shadow gliding, watching, waiting. Her chest tightened. The engines were silent. The passengers were alive, but something in the sky, something that knew her, was waiting to make contact. The valley echoed with silence and the faint mechanical hum of wings slicing through the clouds. Emily exhaled sharply, her hands still gripping the controls, her mind racing. She had pulled off the impossible. Everyone was alive. Yet as she stared up at the sky, she realized the real challenge was only just beginning. High above, two F-22 Raptors sliced through the thin, crisp air, their pilots' faces set in tense masks beneath visors. Captain Ryan Hawkeye Miller and Lieutenant Jason Spector Tran had been monitoring Flight 782 since the moment its transponder blinked a strange anomaly over the Rockies. Both engines had gone dark mid-flight, and the aircraft's erratic descent was textbook panic. Yet, what fascinated and worried the military observers was the pilot's precision. Every maneuver, every adjustment, every calculation was surgical. This was no ordinary commercial pilot. Someone with combat experience was at work, someone the world believed was gone. "Do you see that?" Spector's voice was tight, a barely suppressed mixture of awe and disbelief. "I see her," Hawkeye replied. His hands tightened on the stick. "That's no rookie. No civilian should handle a double-engine failure like that. Ghost Rider, it has to be her." Spector's eyes widened. The name alone carried weight in military circles. Ghost Rider had been a legend, a prodigy in her Air Force days, known for impossible maneuvers, near-miraculous saves, and a reputation that was almost mythic among pilots. Rumors said she had disappeared after leaving active duty, choosing to vanish into civilian life. Now, decades later, here she was, navigating a crippled 737 through a treacherous mountain range with lives on board. The F-22s fell into formation, shadowing her descent. They maintained radio silence. Their presence was a ghostly reassurance, a phantom watching from above. Emily, in the cockpit of Flight 782, had no idea that these silent wings followed every tilt and dip of her plane. Her focus was total, split only between the instruments and the narrow river valley that could serve as a last lifeline. Back in the cabin, passengers clutched each other, praying, gasping, tears streaking faces. The mother with 2 children whispered incessantly to calm them, while the businessman gripped his armrest until his knuckles turned white. A teenager filmed the scene with trembling hands, the phone catching every shudder of the aircraft, every anxious face. None of them realized that above, 2 of the most lethal fighters in the world tracked their fate in near silence. Emily's voice remained calm, precise, almost eerily detached. "Mark, we need to line up with the river. Look for clear terrain, any obstruction, anything that could give us a margin." Mark Dawson's voice shook, betraying the fear he tried to suppress. It's so narrow, we're not going to make it." Emily's gaze flicked to the instruments and then to the windshield. "We're going to make it, trust me." The plane lurched again, the fuselage rattling like a leaf in a storm. She could feel the weight of the aircraft fighting against gravity, air resistance, and sheer panic. Every fiber in her body was alert. This was a ballet of survival. Each calculation, each micro-adjustment, every breath counted. Her mind split into 2 tracks, the immediate need to survive and the subconscious recognition that someone, somewhere above, was silently grading her performance. In the Raptors, Hawkeye and Spectre mirrored each other's maneuvers. "She's lining up with the river," Hawkeye said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's calculating trajectory, wind, speed. She's still in control." Spectre shook his head in disbelief. "After everything she's done, she's still Ghost Rider. I thought she'd left that world behind, I thought." Hawkeye cut him off. "There's no time for sentiment, focus." Meanwhile, Emily's hands moved with fluid precision. She adjusted the flaps and throttles, coaxing the failing engines to respond. Water below sparkled deceptively, hiding jagged rocks and shifting currents. Trees crowded the riverbanks like silent sentinels, ready to tear at wings and fuselage alike. The plane's descent was delicate, almost impossibly so. One wrong move, one fraction of a second of miscalculation, and disaster would follow. Passengers screamed, braced, clutched. Emily's eyes flicked to the rearview screens, tracking turbulence patterns, anticipating gusts, predicting shifts. She remembered a simulated scenario from her Air Force days, a maneuver she had never executed for anyone but herself. Now, it was the difference between life and death. The Raptors above adjusted to flank positions. Hawkeye and Spectre maintained a constant visual, silently communicating through subtle shifts in altitude, speed, and formation. They needed to see the pilot's every reaction, to gauge her skill, to know if the world had a hero alive and hidden among civilians. Every heartbeat in the cockpit of Flight 782 was mirrored by the tension in the F-22 cockpits. Emily's lips pressed into a thin line as the plane descended into the narrow valley. The river glinted below, serpentine and treacherous, a tightrope of survival. Trees scraped the fuselage on either side, metal screeching, the plane shuddering violently. Passengers screamed, some throwing their hands over eyes, others holding loved ones closer, whispering frantic reassurances. And then a new sound. Above the mechanical hum of the struggling 737, Emily detected something familiar. A low-frequency mechanical signature, almost imperceptible but unmistakable. Jets, military jets, F-22s, and her pulse quickened. She had trained for emergencies, but this was different. These were not mere spectators. They were legends in the air, and they knew her. She couldn't afford hesitation. Not with lives dangling below. Not with the river acting as a knife's edge beneath her wings. Above, Hawkeye and Spectre exchanged glances, tension radiating through the cockpits. "She sees us," Hawkeye said. "She's aware, but still handling the aircraft with absolute precision. Incredible." Spectre shook his head again, disbelief etched across his face. She's the same Ghost Rider we trained with. Every calculation, every micro-move, it's her instinct. It's flawless." Emily's eyes narrowed. The river's width shrank, the bend in the canyon grew sharper. Every instinct screamed, adjust, bank, accelerate, decelerate. The passenger's fear was a living thing pressing into her senses. She felt every heartbeat in the cabin as if it were her own, every trembling hand, every whispered prayer. And then it happened. The engines faltered once more. The fuselage trembled. Emily's stomach lurched. Time slowed. The plane dipped perilously. Her hands were steady, but her mind raced a million calculations a second. The river was just ahead, but trees and rocks threatened from all sides. She could feel the plane tilting, twisting, responding, or resisting every command. Hawkeye and Spectre held their positions, observing, calculating. They couldn't intervene, couldn't risk breaking protocol. And yet, admiration and awe coursed through them. "If she makes this, she'll be a legend all over again," Hawkeye murmured. Emily's fingers danced over the controls. She lined up the plane, banking slightly to avoid the tallest pines, skimming the water with the precision of a seasoned warrior. The fuselage shuddered as it scraped shallow river rocks. Passengers screamed, a chaotic symphony of terror and relief. Her heart pounded in rhythm with the engines struggling to hold her airborne, the river below, the mountains on either side. And then, just as suddenly, the river stretched open. The plane's momentum carried them over a small widening. Emily exhaled sharply, sweat stinging her eyes. She had done it. She had threaded the needle through death itself. The aircraft skidded across the water, bouncing violently but intact. The passengers were alive. For a moment the valley was silent, save for splashing water and shuddering metal. Above, the F-22s adjusted, maintaining formation. Hawkeye's voice was barely audible over the comms. "Ghost Rider, you've done it. We read you. Confirm your status." Emily froze. A chill ran down her spine. The F-22 pilots knew her history. They had broken radio silence because of her, because of the call sign she had buried long ago. In the valley below, passengers cheered, oblivious to the silent, lethal observers above. But Emily understood. The past she thought she had left behind had just caught up. And she realized with a shiver that survival wasn't over. Someone above was watching, waiting, and recognition had changed everything. The river gleamed below like a sliver of silver, twisting through the jagged Colorado Rockies. Emily Ghost Rider Lawson's hands gripped the yoke with white-knuckled precision. Flight 782 shuddered violently beneath her, the fuselage groaning in protest. Both engines had sputtered and died once more, leaving the plane precariously balanced between glide and freefall. The valley offered a narrow strip of survival, a meager sliver of water bordered by jagged rocks and towering pines. One miscalculation, one tiny error, would tear the plane apart, killing everyone aboard. The passengers were panic incarnate. Mothers clutched children with a desperation that made Emily's chest tighten. The older businessman whispered muttered prayers to no one in particular. A teenage girl pressed her phone against her chest, recording every terrifying second. Emily could feel the collective pulse of the cabin, a living, frantic organism riding the thread of her skill. She could not fail them. She would not fail them. "Mark," she said, her voice clipped but calm, "flare at the last possible second. Bank slightly to port to avoid those pines. Adjust throttle, don't stall. Watch for rocks, eyes sharp." Mark Dawson nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, Captain." His hands trembled slightly as he followed her instructions, but he knew better than to doubt her. He had seen her precision in calmer moments, but this was something else. Time slowed. Every second stretched into eternity. Emily's mind calculated wind, speed, altitude, glide angle, and fuselage stress simultaneously. She had flown crippled aircraft in war zones before, but nothing had prepared her for the stakes here. Hundreds of lives, civilians who had no concept of combat training, trusting her implicitly. She adjusted the flaps, coaxing the plane to descend with surgical precision. The river twisted, narrowing dangerously, flanked by jagged rocks and trees that threatened to rip the fuselage apart. The engines groaned, begging for air, threatening to fail entirely. The plane wobbled, shuddered, dipped. Emily's stomach lurched as the valley closed around them, a canyon that seemed to want to swallow the aircraft whole. Above, the two F-22s hovered in near-perfect formation, pilots invisible behind visors, wings cutting the clouds like knives. Hawkeye and Spectre had been tracking her descent in awe. Their radar and instruments confirmed what their eyes already told them. Emily was performing miracles. Every movement, every adjustment, every microsecond reaction was flawless. She was Ghost Rider, and the call sign was no exaggeration. "She's committed," Hawkeye whispered, voice tense. "No hesitation. Look at her go, absolutely precise. This is impossible for a civilian pilot." Spectre nodded, fists tightening on his controls. "She's reading the terrain like it's a HUD. Every twist, every bend, she's thinking 2 steps ahead of physics itself." Back in the cockpit of Flight 782, Emily scanned the river's final stretch. Rocks jutted up like jagged teeth, water churned unpredictably, and the current twisted through the narrowing valley. Her heart pounded, yet her expression remained calm, almost eerily so. Sweat ran down her temples, stinging her eyes. She blinked, wiped it away, and refocused. "Passengers," she said over the intercom, her voice steady, "brace for landing. Keep calm, we're going to make it, trust me." A cacophony of murmurs and gasps followed. Children clutched stuffed animals, mothers pressed foreheads to tiny hands, and the teenager filming bit her lip, eyes wide. None could understand the silent calculation driving their survival. Emily adjusted the throttle once more, coaxing the failing engines to maintain minimal thrust. The plane dipped closer to the water. Trees scraped the fuselage. Sparks flew from wing edges kissing rocks. The vibration of the airframe was almost unbearable. Emily's instincts, honed over years of classified missions, guided her. She flared at just the right moment, skimming the river with surgical accuracy, wings balancing against the current of gravity, water, and panic. The plane bounced across the surface, each impact a violent jolt that tested metal, hydraulics, and human nerves. Passengers screamed. Emily felt each vibration, each resistance, as if the plane were an extension of her body. A misjudgment would be fatal. She banked slightly to avoid a jutting rock, adjusted rudder, throttled what little power remained, and guided the aircraft like a tightrope walker clinging to life. Above, the Raptors mirrored every move. Hawkeye and Spectre couldn't intervene, protocol forbidding engagement with a civilian airliner, but they followed every inch of Flight 782's trajectory, silent guardians observing perfection in motion. She's actually going to make it," Spectre breathed. Hawkeye didn't answer. He simply watched, fists clenched, jaw tight. The plane had lost engines entirely once more, yet Emily coaxed it forward, water churning beneath the fuselage, trees screaming past the windows. The final bend of the river approached, a sharp curve with a narrowing passage lined by jagged rocks. Emily adjusted. One last flick of the controls, one subtle calculation of glide angle, thrust, and bank. The plane dipped, caught, skimmed, bounced. The fuselage groaned violently. Passengers screamed, some clutching each other, some closing their eyes in terror. And then the widening appeared, a clearing just big enough to bring the plane to rest. Emily exhaled sharply, guiding the plane across the river. The aircraft skidded, bouncing off rocks, the water rushing past, then finally slowed, coming to a shuddering, uneven stop. Silence fell in the cockpit and cabin alike. Then came the cheers, raw, unrestrained relief from passengers who had survived the impossible. Mothers hugged children, the teenager's phone was shaking as she filmed the miraculous landing, and a businessman's face, pale and tense, broke into a shaky smile. Emily allowed herself a brief exhale, but her eyes remained on the sky. Above, the F-22s hovered, engines silent, wings cutting through the clouds like guardians from another world. Hawkeye's voice broke radio silence, deliberate but careful. "Ghost Rider, confirm your status." Emily froze, a chill running down her spine. The pilots above knew her history. Her call sign, long buried in the past, had resurfaced. Protocol, secrecy, and legend intersected in one instant. She had saved everyone aboard, but the recognition of her past meant she was no longer just a commercial pilot. Mark glanced at her. "Captain, what was that?" His voice trembled, a mixture of awe and disbelief. Emily's lips pressed into a thin line. "That was survival," she said softly. Her eyes swept the valley, upward toward the unseen watchers above. "But it's not over." Even as passengers celebrated, Emily felt the weight of the sky above. The Raptors weren't just observers, they were sentinels. Her secret life, hidden behind years of civilian normalcy, had been exposed in a heartbeat. The world would never look at her the same way again. And Emily understood the truth. Survival had ended, but reckoning was just beginning. For the first time in years, she allowed herself a small, bitter smile. She had threaded death itself through a razor's edge, saved 155 lives, and now the past had found her in a way she could not ignore. Above, the F-22s banked slightly, circling, scanning. Hawkeye and Spectre exchanged a look that spoke volumes. Ghost Rider had returned, and the silent war between her past and present had just begun. The river sparkled innocently beneath the landing aircraft, oblivious to the lives it had preserved, while the mountains loomed like silent witnesses. Emily's pulse thrummed with the tension of accomplishment and the dread of what recognition would bring. The impossible was done, but what came next might be even harder. The air above the Rockies shimmered with tension. Two F-22 Raptors, cutting through the thinning clouds like lethal shadows, hovered silently above the winding Colorado River, where Flight 782 had just scraped itself to a precarious stop. Captain Ryan, Hawkeye, Miller, and Lieutenant Jason Spectre Tran had been monitoring every moment, their jaws tight, eyes scanning their screens, reflexes poised for split-second action. The impossible had already happened. The crippled aircraft was on the river, all passengers alive, but their interest was not merely in survival. It was in the pilot, Ghost Rider. "She's extraordinary," Spectre murmured, voice barely audible over the cockpit comms. "No civilian could do that. That was war-level precision." Hawkeye's gaze didn't leave the river. "She's Ghost Rider. We both know it. I can't believe she's flying a commercial jet after all these years. We thought she was gone, disappeared into civilian life. Yet here she is, performing miracles in plain sight." In the cockpit of Flight 782, Emily Lawson felt a gnawing tension she couldn't place. Passengers were evacuating the plane, stepping carefully onto the riverbank, some limping from minor injuries, others still frozen in disbelief. She had landed them, but something told her the danger wasn't over. Her pulse quickened as her eyes scanned the sky. She sensed them, the Raptors, watching, evaluating, assessing. Protocol dictated that civilians should be untouchable, but these planes were military-grade, top secret, and the pilots knew her. Emily toggled the emergency radio channels, nothing but static. She considered her options: attempt a broadcast, wait for standard rescue, or remain silent. Her instincts screamed caution. She had hidden her past meticulously for a reason. If the wrong person learned her identity, the fallout could be catastrophic. But the Raptors above were not ordinary. They were shadows from her history. Her past had just caught up. On the riverbank, passengers began to realize that the danger might not be entirely gone. Many scanned the sky, eyes wide, sensing the silent watchers. Emily's hands hovered near the radio, tension radiating through her posture. The roar of adrenaline was mingled with fatigue, and yet every fiber of her being remained alert. She had faced worse in the cockpit, combat missions over hostile territory, but never with hundreds of lives so directly dependent on her decisions, while being observed by unknown but undoubtedly skilled entities. Above, Hawkeye and Spectre exchanged subtle maneuvers, silent communication that only years of flying in tandem could permit. "She's stabilizing," Hawkeye noted, watching Emily's tiny, precise adjustments through their advanced optics. "But she's aware we're here. She feels it. Ghost Rider always notices. Spectre's hands tightened on the stick. She's keeping control, but it's obvious she doesn't know whether we're friends or potential threats. Incredible composure. Emily's mind raced. Every instinct told her to prepare for communication, but she also knew discretion could save lives. Her lips pressed into a firm line. She toggled the instruments, calculated wind direction, river current, and potential extraction points. She was still in command, still the guardian of every life aboard, but a gnawing worry edged into her awareness. The F-22 pilots above weren't ordinary observers. They recognized her. Her call sign, her history, her skill, it all telegraphed who she was to the world she had left behind. Mark Dawson, sitting beside her, noticed her hesitation. "Emily, are we okay? Are they going to?" His voice trailed off, eyes wide, reflecting both relief at survival and terror at what might come next. Emily shook her head, suppressing the tension rising in her chest. "Mark, keep your focus on the passengers. I'll handle what's above." Her voice was calm, but inside, her mind was already running through contingency plans, recalling long-forgotten drills from her Air Force days. Above, the Raptors dipped slightly, wings slicing through clouds, radar tracking the landing, sensors analyzing flight dynamics. Hawkeye leaned forward. "We should have anticipated this," he murmured. "If anyone could pull this off, it's her. But why now? Why in this scenario?" Spectre's expression tightened. "It doesn't matter why. What matters is that she's alive, she's in control, and the passengers are safe. That's all we can gauge for now. Engagement protocol prohibits interference with civilian craft unless something goes wrong." Emily realized that the silent Raptor pilots were not just observers. They were weighing her skills, her judgment, and the delicate balance between exposure and secrecy. Her secret life, painstakingly hidden for years, had become a beacon for those who knew her. And she knew in that instant that there was no undoing it. Passengers continued to disembark onto the rocky banks of the river, some clinging to one another, some staring up at the sky. Emily noticed a young boy, no older than 10, gripping a stuffed bear with wide, frightened eyes. She forced herself to focus on him, forcing the flood of adrenaline and fear back into calculated control. Each life was a tether, keeping her grounded amidst the chaos. And then it happened, a shift in the Raptors' formation, subtle but unmistakable. Hawkeye tilted his wings slightly downward. Spectre mirrored him. It was not aggression. It was acknowledgement. Emily's instincts picked up the pattern, recognition, respect. And beneath it, an unspoken warning: your past is alive and the world now knows it. Emily felt a cold rush of adrenaline. The passengers were alive, but the sky above carried a threat she could not ignore. The Raptors' silent presence signaled more than observation. It was a test. The military eyes above weren't just witnesses. They were deciding whether she was still part of a game she had left behind, whether her skills still counted in a world she had tried to walk away from. Mark glanced at her again. "Emily, who are they?" She shook her head faintly. "I'll explain later, just keep them calm." Her gaze stayed fixed on the sky. She had survived the impossible landing, but the encounter with the F-22s made it clear that her life, as she knew it, was about to change. Hawkeye broke the silence of the comms. "Ghost Rider, do you copy?" Emily's breath caught. For decades, she had avoided this exact situation. Protocol, secrecy, legend, everything she had tried to leave behind had converged in this single moment. Yet she knew she had no choice. With the passengers watching, vulnerable and alive, she had to respond, if only to ensure their continued safety. Her fingers hovered over the radio switch. The static of the emergency frequency filled the cockpit, tense and oppressive. The river below reflected the morning sun in fractured shards, a deceptive serenity beneath which chaos had nearly reigned. And then she keyed the mic, her voice steady, calm, betraying none of the fear and adrenaline hammering in her chest. "This is Ghost Rider. All passengers accounted for. Plane is stable. Requesting guidance." Above, the Raptors banked slightly, engines whispering in acknowledgement. Hawkeye's eyes narrowed. Spectre's grip on the controls loosened slightly, the tension easing, replaced by cautious respect. Ghost Rider, she had survived, she had commanded, and she had revealed herself in a single, quiet moment. But the tension in the cockpit did not dissipate. Emily understood instinctively that the world above the river was still watching. Her secret life was no longer secret. The F-22 pilot's presence signaled that recognition had come, and with recognition came responsibility she could not evade. She glanced at the passengers, their faces reflecting relief, awe, and terror. She had saved them. She had done the impossible, but above, the Raptors waited. The silent watchers of the sky, the ones who knew her history, were now active participants in her present. Emily's pulse raced, mind already calculating the next steps. The river landing was over. Survival had been achieved. But the true reckoning, the confrontation with her past, her identity, and the eyes that now recognized her, was just beginning. The mountains loomed silent, the river sparkled deceptively calm, and the Raptors held their vigil above. Ghost Rider had emerged from obscurity, but the world had only just begun to take notice. Emily Lawson exhaled, trying to steady her hands, but her pulse raced in a relentless drumbeat. Flight 782 was finally stable, skimming the river, passengers disembarking with relief etched into every expression. Yet her eyes remained fixed on the sky. Above, the two F-22 Raptors hovered, lethal and silent, observing with precision only Ghost Rider could truly appreciate. She had landed the plane, both engines dead, hundreds of lives intact, but something about the air above the Rockies had shifted. The Raptors weren't just watching. They were communicating silently through their maneuvers, and Emily knew instinctively that they recognized her. Her fingers hovered over the emergency radio controls. Years of secrecy, of civilian life carefully curated to hide her past, collided with the reality now blaring across her mind. If she used the wrong words, revealed the wrong information, everything could unravel. And yet, there was only one choice that could bridge the gap between life and safety, between trust and catastrophe. "Ghost Rider, do you copy?" came the voice, calm, authoritative, but carrying a weight that made Emily's chest tighten. Her eyes widened slightly. That voice, the unmistakable tone, precise and deliberate, was proof. They knew her. Her call sign, buried deep in classified files and whispered among elite pilots, had resurfaced. She had been forced into the impossible, and now the world of her past was connecting with the present. Emily took a steadying breath, her mind racing. She keyed the microphone. Her voice, steady but laced with the faintest tension, broke the silence of the emergency frequency. "This is Ghost Rider," she said. "Flight 782, all passengers accounted for, aircraft stable on river, requesting guidance." Silence hung for a heartbeat. Then, a reply crackled through the static. "Copy, Ghost Rider, we read you. Maintain position. We are en route to assess the situation." Emily's heart skipped a beat. The F-22s were not only observing, they were responding. She felt a rush of adrenaline, tempered by the awareness that the pilots knew everything, her history, her call sign, her skill. They had broken radio silence because of her, and every second now carried the weight of unspoken consequences. Below, passengers were slowly realizing the enormity of their survival. Children clung to parents, eyes wide, whispering excitedly. Adults embraced, shaking, tears running unchecked. Emily forced herself to focus, ensuring everyone remained calm while keeping her mind attuned to the Raptors above. Every instinct told her to prepare for anything. She had survived the impossible landing, but the encounter with the F-22s changed the rules. In the Raptors, Captain Ryan "Hawkeye" Miller adjusted his formation, wings cutting the clouds with surgical precision. "She's handling herself," he murmured. "Even knowing we're here, she's maintaining control. Incredible." Lieutenant Jason Spector Tran exhaled slowly. "It's like watching a legend, A ghost come back to life. Hawkeye nodded. She's Ghost Rider, we both know it. Every movement, every micro-adjustment, she's flawless. But why now? Why civilian flight? We need answers, but first we ensure safety. This is protocol. Emily's mind raced. She had hidden her past for a reason, avoided attention, and blended into civilian life seamlessly. Yet here, above the Rockies, her legend was alive, and the world had just recognized it. She realized that survival had been only the first part of the test. Recognition was the second. "Passengers, please remain calm," Emily said over the intercom, her voice composed. "Medical and rescue teams are on their way. Follow the crew's instructions." Her gaze flicked to Mark Dawson. He looked at her, bewildered but trusting. "Emily, what's going on?" She shook her head faintly, hiding the tightness in her chest. "Just trust me. Keep everyone calm. We're not done yet." The F-22s above shifted formation slightly, a subtle acknowledgement, signaling both caution and respect. Emily understood immediately. These pilots were not here to threaten. They were here to observe and ensure the situation remained under control. And yet, the recognition carried a silent warning. Her secret was out, and exposure could have ramifications far beyond this valley. Above, Hawkeye's voice came through the comms again, calm but clipped. "Ghost Rider confirmed no immediate injuries among passengers. Structural integrity of the aircraft." Emily answered, voice precise. "Passengers are safe. Minor bumps and bruises, no life-threatening injuries. Aircraft sustained minor wing and fuselage scratches but is stable on riverbank. Risk minimal at present." Spectre leaned closer to his controls, scanning the data with meticulous care. "She's a miracle worker," he whispered. "Not just saving lives, she's commanding everything with the skill of a combat pilot. But she's not just anyone. She's Ghost Rider. Protocol requires notification up the chain, but who do you call when the civilian you've been watching for years turns out to be exactly who you thought she was?" Hawkeye said nothing for a moment, letting the silence stretch. Then he exhaled. "You let her do her job. She's proven she can. We maintain observation, but we don't intervene unless necessary. She earned that much." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine. The F-22s above weren't just watching. They were validating her, acknowledging her skill, her past, and her ability to command even under impossible circumstances. The passengers below, unaware of the silent drama playing out overhead, celebrated quietly, still shaken but safe. Emily allowed herself a small internal nod. She had won the first battle, but the recognition from above meant that her past had returned to the surface, and the repercussions were just beginning. Hawkeye adjusted the Raptor slightly, signaling Spectre. "She's alive. Passengers are alive. Ghost Rider is back. But now we have to consider extraction and debrief. She can't remain unknown any longer." Emily keyed the microphone again. "Ghost Rider here, requesting continued guidance and safe passage for passengers. Please advise." The reply came steady and authoritative. "Understood. Maintain position. Rescue and safety teams are en route. We advise minimal movement until cleared. Ghost Rider, you are acknowledged." Emily froze slightly. Acknowledged. The word resonated. Recognition wasn't just professional, it was personal, a nod to the past she had carefully hidden. And with it came responsibility. The silent F-22s, lethal and precise, had now officially confirmed her identity. Mark leaned toward her, whispering, "Emily, what did they mean by that?" She shook her head faintly, voice low. "It means the world just got a glimpse of who I really am, and they're watching. We're not alone in this valley." The sun glinted off the river, serene and oblivious to the high-stakes tension unfolding in the skies above. Emily's mind ran through contingency plans, considering every possible scenario. The F-22 pilots, recognition was both a relief and a warning. Her hidden life had resurfaced, and there was no turning back. As rescue helicopters approached from the distance, Emily's eyes remained fixed on the Raptor shadows above. The calm of the riverbank was deceptive. Passengers were safe, but Emily understood that her life, carefully curated and hidden for years, had intersected with a world that would never let her remain anonymous again. The Ghost Rider call sign was no longer a secret. It was alive, acknowledged, and visible to those who had the power to change everything. She glanced down at the passengers, their faces a mixture of relief and lingering terror. "Stay calm," she said quietly. "Help is coming. Everyone is safe now." Yet even as she spoke, her eyes flicked skyward, aware that the watchers above had seen everything. Recognition carried weight. Recognition carried consequences. And Emily knew deep in her core that the most difficult challenges were yet to come. The F-22s held formation, circling slowly, engines whispering in acknowledgement. Hawkeye and Spectre exchanged a glance that carried both respect and concern. Ghost Rider had returned. The world had witnessed her skill, and the silent acknowledgement from the skies above meant that nothing would ever be the same. Emily's jaw tightened. She had saved hundreds of lives. She had performed the impossible. And yet, as the sun glinted off the river, she realized that the battle for her identity, the collision between her hidden past and the present, had only just begun. Emily Lawson kept her hands poised over the controls, though Flight 782 now rested on the riverbank, stabilized by its precarious position among jagged rocks and swirling currents. The passengers had begun to unbuckle, their relief palpable, but Emily's eyes were fixed on the sky. Above, two F-22 Raptors hovered with lethal precision, their pilots scanning every movement. Captain Ryan Hawkeye Miller and Lieutenant Jason Spectre Tran had been silent observers, but the acknowledgement of her call sign, Ghost Rider, had shifted the atmosphere. Recognition carried weight, and weight carried consequences. The rescue helicopters were approaching, their blades slicing the crisp mountain air. The passengers' attention shifted skyward, unaware of the silent threat and the history hovering just above them. Emily could see the slight tilt of the Raptor's wings, the subtle banking that signaled readiness, assessment, and perhaps judgment. They were not here to threaten, but they were here to ensure that Ghost Rider's skill, her past, and her judgment were all visible to those who needed to know. Mark Dawson leaned over the console, voice low. "Emily, they know you. Why are they here?" Emily didn't answer immediately. Her mind was running calculations, escape routes, passenger safety, communications, potential fallout, and most importantly, the intentions of the F-22 pilots. She finally spoke, her voice measured, calm, but carrying a weight of authority. "They're here because of me. My call sign, they know it, and that means everything we've worked to keep hidden is now exposed. Keep the passengers calm. Follow my lead. That's all we can do for now." Hawkeye's voice cut across the comms, deliberate but not aggressive. "Ghost Rider, maintain your current position. Rescue is inbound. We require confirmation of passenger safety and structural integrity. Status report." Emily keyed the microphone, carefully choosing her words. "Passengers are accounted for. Minor injuries, nothing life-threatening. Aircraft is stable on riverbank. Minor fuselage damage from landing. No immediate risk." Spectre's voice came next, quieter, almost reverent. "Acknowledged, Ghost Rider. Impressive control under extreme conditions. It's been decades, yet your skill is flawless. How have you remained hidden for so long?" Emily's chest tightened. A question like that was impossible to answer without exposing years of secrecy, of civilian identity carefully curated to hide her Air Force past. "Some skills never leave you," she said cautiously, allowing her eyes to stay fixed on the helicopters descending toward the river. "I'm focused on the passengers. That's all that matters right now." Above, the Raptors adjusted formation slightly, signaling acknowledgement and approval. Hawkeye's eyes narrowed on his HUD. "She's balancing caution with confidence, precision under pressure. Ghost Rider has returned. But what now? Extraction will be delicate. We need to ensure civilian safety and secure her without escalation." Emily could feel the pressure of every life aboard Flight 782, and it was compounded by the knowledge that her past was visible, alive and watching. The rescue helicopters approached cautiously, landing on the widened banks of the river with mechanical precision. Emergency crews began unloading stretchers, medical equipment, and personnel trained for high-risk rescues. Passengers slowly, tremblingly began disembarking, guided by the flight attendants and the calm authority of Captain Lawson. And yet Emily's attention remained skyward. The Raptors did not descend. They remained vigilant, almost predatory, observing every micro-movement of the river landing, every decision, every hesitation. Emily understood the unspoken communication. The world above was assessing her, weighing her abilities, and preparing to reconnect her past with her present. Mark leaned closer, whispering, "Emily, are you going to tell them about everything?" Emily's eyes flicked to him briefly, then returned to the hovering F-22s. "Not yet," she said quietly. "Right now we survive, that's all that matters. After that we navigate what comes next." Spectre tilted his wings slightly, silent communication with Hawkeye. "She's maintaining control, even knowing we're watching. That's Ghost Rider. Remarkable composure." Hawkeye exhaled, jaw tight. "And dangerous. Recognition always changes the game. One wrong word, one wrong move, and her secret, and ours, could unravel. We need to manage this carefully. Civilian lives are on the line, and her skills make her both asset and liability." Emily took a deep breath. She keyed the microphone again. "Passengers are disembarking safely. Rescue teams are coordinating. All systems monitored. I request continued airspace monitoring to prevent further complications." Hawkeye responded, voice clipped but measured. "Acknowledged. We will maintain observation. Ensure passengers follow protocol and remain safe. Ghost Rider, your skill is extraordinary, but remain aware. Recognition has consequences." Emily nodded slightly, though they couldn't see it. Recognition always carried consequences. Every maneuver, every skill displayed in plain sight, had exposed her to a world she had worked to avoid. Ghost Rider was no longer a secret, and the F-22 pilots above, symbols of the military world she had left, had just reminded her that her past was alive and watching. On the riverbank, emergency crews directed passengers away from the aircraft. Mothers clutched children, teenagers whispered frantic stories to anyone who would listen, and a few adults silently thanked the calm authority of Emily Lawson. But even as gratitude and relief radiated from the crowd, Emily's mind remained alert. She was thinking ahead, anticipating questions, protocols, and the inevitable investigations. The landing was a success, but the exposure of her identity meant the real challenges were only beginning. Above, Hawkeye and Spectre maintained formation, scanning the area. "Extraction will be delicate," Hawkeye muttered. "She can't simply fly away. Civilian status, passenger safety, every move has to be calculated. Ghost Rider has emerged, but the world isn't ready for her yet." Spectre nodded. "She's brilliant, but she's a civilian now. How do we integrate that skill set without causing an international incident or a media frenzy?" Emily watched the helicopters land, passengers stepping onto the rocky bank. She realized that she was no longer invisible. Her skill, her call sign, her legend, Ghost Rider, had been witnessed, acknowledged, and now would inevitably draw attention. Mark glanced at her, eyes wide. "Emily, are we going to be okay?" She allowed herself a small, grim smile. "We're alive, that's step one. Step two, we deal with what comes next, and we survive, that's all that matters." The Raptors above remained, circling slowly, their presence a constant reminder that her past had returned. Emily understood implicitly. The F-22 pilots were not enemies, but they were the bridge between her hidden life and the world she had left behind. And that bridge was narrow, precarious, and fraught with unseen dangers. Hawkeye's voice came through the comms again. "Ghost Rider, maintain position until rescue teams report full passenger safety. Your skill is extraordinary. Recognition has occurred. Expect follow-up protocols and debriefing." Emily keyed the microphone. Understood. All passengers safe, aircraft stable, awaiting further instructions. As the helicopters continued coordinating with rescue teams, Emily's eyes flicked upward once more. The Raptors circled silently, wings cutting the sky, engines whispering in acknowledgement. Ghost Rider had survived the impossible landing. She had saved every life on board. But above, the military observers waited, silently marking her skill, her judgment, and the consequences of recognition. The passengers were safe. The landing was miraculous. And yet, Emily Lawson knew that the hardest part was just beginning. Her secret was exposed. Ghost Rider was alive, visible, and the world above the Rockies had taken notice. She took a deep breath, hands steadying on the controls, and allowed herself a moment of clarity. The impossible landing was done. Recognition had arrived. And now, the collision of past and present would begin. The river shimmered beneath the morning sun, but Emily Lawson's mind was focused on the sky above. Flight 782's passengers had been guided safely onto the rocky banks, trembling but alive, yet Emily's heart raced with a different kind of tension. The F-22s hovering above were no longer silent observers. They were witnesses to her hidden life. Ghost Rider, a legend buried in the depths of her Air Force past, had been exposed, and with recognition came consequences. She kept her hands steady on the controls, pretending calm to the passengers, but inside a storm raged. Protocols she had followed for years, the civilian identity she had painstakingly maintained, and the silence she had nurtured were now shattered. The Raptor pilots were watching every micro-movement, every decision. They knew her. They had seen her skill. They had identified the Ghost Rider. Hawkeye's voice cut through the comms, calm yet weighted. Ghost Rider, maintain your current position. Rescue teams are coordinating. Passengers accounted for. We need confirmation of structural integrity and safety. Status. Emily keyed the microphone. Her voice was steady, careful, betraying none of the adrenaline coursing through her. Passengers are stable. Aircraft sustained minor fuselage and wing damage from landing but is structurally sound. All passengers uninjured, minor bumps and bruises only, awaiting further instructions. Spectre's voice followed. Ghost Rider, extraordinary control. You handled multiple critical failures and landing without incident. Your skill remains unparalleled. Emily exhaled, forcing herself to focus. Praise from the F-22 pilots was both reassuring and dangerous. They were not just acknowledging her skill, they were acknowledging her identity. She could not allow her secret to slip further into public view, yet here, above the Rockies, the first thread had already unraveled. Mark Dawson leaned toward her, voice low, trembling. Emily, who are they? How do they know you? Her eyes flicked to him, tense but controlled. They are from my past, she said, carefully choosing words. People who know what I used to do. That's all you need to know for now. Keep the passengers calm. The helicopters coordinating the rescue began moving the passengers to safety, but Emily's attention remained on the Raptors. The F-22s circled slowly, wings cutting the sunlight like knives. Hawkeye and Spectre were not just observing, they were calculating, assessing, ready to intervene if the fragile balance was broken. Ghost Rider had been revealed, and now she had to navigate this collision between past and present carefully. Hawkeye tilted his wings slightly, signaling acknowledgement. Ghost Rider, maintain current position. Await ground assessment teams. Your skill has been verified. Recognition has occurred. Follow protocol for civilian interaction. Emily's pulse quickened. Recognition meant the world was now aware of Ghost Rider. She could no longer be just a commercial pilot. Her legend had resurfaced, and the F-22 pilots' silent observation ensured that every decision, every word, every movement carried weight. She was no longer invisible. Spectre's voice came quietly, almost reverent. She's handling herself perfectly under pressure, even now. Recognition hasn't shaken her. Ghost Rider remains flawless. Emily glanced at Mark. Stay with the passengers. Make sure they follow instructions. Calm, orderly evacuation is critical. Keep them focused on the ground, not the sky. Mark nodded, eyes wide, still processing the extraordinary events. Emily's fingers hovered over the controls, her gaze scanning the river, the helicopters, and the sky. Her instincts told her that exposure, even partial, was dangerous. The world now knew Ghost Rider existed, and that knowledge had the potential to spiral out of control. The helicopters began coordinating with rescue teams, moving injured passengers and setting up temporary triage on the riverbank. Emergency personnel spoke to passengers, calming their fears, but Emily remained vigilant. Every movement, every sound, every glance upward reminded her that the watchers above were more than passive observers. Hawkeye and Spectre were evaluating her, weighing her every choice, deciding whether she remained a trusted ally or a potential liability. She keyed the microphone again. Ghost Rider here, passengers stable, aircraft stable, awaiting further instructions from rescue coordination teams. Hawkeye's voice was deliberate. Acknowledged, remain at position until further instruction. Civilian rescue in progress. Ghost Rider, your skill has been verified and recognized. Prepare for debriefing. Emily's stomach tightened. Debriefing meant questions, exposure, records, scrutiny. It meant her past would collide with her present in a way she could not control. She had saved lives, performed the impossible landing, and survived where many would have failed. But now she was being pulled back into a world she thought she had left behind. Mark leaned closer. Emily, what does this mean? What's going to happen to us? She shook her head slightly. It means we survive today. Beyond that, we deal with what comes next. That's all we can control. Above, the Raptors shifted formation slightly, engines whispering in acknowledgement, wings slicing the mountain air with lethal grace. Hawkeye and Spectre had watched her throughout the crisis, silently validating every movement, every calculation. Recognition had occurred. Ghost Rider was alive, visible, and the world would know. The rescue teams began escorting passengers toward the helicopters, their attention on safety protocols, not yet aware of the silent watchers overhead. Emily's hands rested lightly on the controls, her mind running through calculations, debriefing protocols, potential media exposure, military inquiries, and the inevitable questions that would follow. Hawkeye's voice came again. Ghost Rider, prepare to coordinate with ground teams. Maintain calm. Civilian lives are priority. Recognition has occurred. Await instructions from authorities. Emily keyed the microphone, voice steady despite the adrenaline. Understood. Coordination will proceed as passengers are secured. Aircraft remain stable. Ghost Rider out. Her eyes scanned the riverbank, the helicopters, and finally the sky. The Raptors remained, circling silently, lethal guardians and witnesses at once. Ghost Rider had returned, and her hidden life was no longer safe. Every move she made from this point forward would be observed, recorded, and assessed. Mark whispered again, voice trembling. Emily, are we going to be okay? She allowed herself a small, grim smile. We're alive. That's the first step. Everything else, we handle it as it comes. Stay calm, focus on the passengers. That's all that matters right now. The sun glinted off the river, calm and serene, as if oblivious to the tension above. But Emily knew better. The F-22 pilots above were not just observers. They were the bridge between her past and her present. The Ghost Rider legend was no longer a secret, and recognition had changed everything. Hawkeye's voice came through one last time. Ghost Rider, passengers stable, aircraft stable. You've demonstrated extraordinary skill. Recognition has occurred. Stand by for debriefing. Emily's jaw tightened. She had saved lives. She had performed the impossible. And yet the acknowledgement above the riverbank was a warning. Her past had resurfaced, and the collision with the present was inevitable. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to remain calm, her hands steady on the controls. The impossible landing was over. The world had seen Ghost Rider. And now the reckoning, the The questions, the scrutiny, the exposure was just beginning. The river sparkled beneath the aircraft, passengers safe, emergency crews coordinating. But Emily Lawson knew that nothing would ever be the same. Ghost Rider had returned, recognized and visible, and the sky above held the silent judgment of those who had known her best and feared her skill. The roar of helicopter blades filled the crisp mountain air, blending with the murmurs of passengers and the faint hum of Flight 782's crippled engines. Emily Lawson stepped carefully onto the riverbank, her hands steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. She had performed the impossible, both engines dead, hundreds of lives on board, and every single passenger had survived. But the impossible landing was only the beginning. Now came the reckoning. Above, the F-22 Raptors hovered, silent sentinels in the sky. Captain Ryan Hawkeye Miller and Lieutenant Jason Spector Tran observed every movement, their eyes trained not on the passengers but on her. Recognition had occurred, her call sign, Ghost Rider, had resurfaced, and the world she had hidden from for years was now watching, waiting, calculating. "Emily," Mark whispered, breathless, still processing the sheer magnitude of what they had just survived. They know you. Who are they? What happens now?" Emily glanced at him briefly, forcing calm into her posture. "They're not here to hurt us," she said quietly. "They're watching, making sure everyone's safe, but they know who I am. Ghost Rider isn't a secret anymore. From this point on, nothing will be the same." On the riverbank, emergency crews began directing passengers to triage stations, some limping, some wide-eyed with disbelief, all shaken yet alive. Mothers clutched children, teenagers whispered stories into phones, businessmen muttered prayers. Emily's eyes scanned the crowd, ensuring no one panicked, no one wandered into danger, but she couldn't ignore the looming shadows above. The Raptors were more than observers. They were reminders of her past, her legacy, and the expectations now resting on her shoulders. Hawkeye's voice came through the emergency frequency, measured but unmistakably authoritative. "Ghost Rider, maintain your position. Rescue coordination is in progress. Confirmation of passenger safety and structural integrity is required. We will be conducting debriefing shortly." Emily keyed the microphone, her voice calm, betraying none of the storm inside her. "Passengers are stable. Aircraft is structurally sound. Rescue teams coordinating evacuation. All minor injuries reported. Ghost Rider standing by for further instructions." Spector's voice followed, softer this time, almost reverent. "Your skill, it's remarkable. Even after all these years, Ghost Rider is as precise, calm, and effective as ever. But now, the world knows. Recognition has consequences." Emily's chest tightened. She had hidden her identity, escaped the attention of the world, and forged a quiet civilian life. Yet in a matter of minutes, every secret she had carefully preserved had been exposed. She realized that recognition carried weight, responsibility, and scrutiny she could not avoid. The passengers continued to disembark, still shaking, some whispering urgent questions about the near-miraculous landing. Emily allowed them a brief moment of normalcy, keeping her instructions concise and her tone authoritative. "Follow the crews, stay calm, and remain with your group. Help is here. Everyone is safe." Mark glanced at her again, voice low. "Emily, what now? What do we do with them, with everything?" She gave him a small, grim smile, steadying herself. "Now, we ensure safety first. Everything else we handle after. Focus on the passengers. That's all that matters right now." Above, the Raptors shifted formation, wings cutting the sunlight like blades. Hawkeye's eyes narrowed on his HUD. "Extraction and debrief will be delicate. She's civilian now. We must balance recognition with safety, skill with protocol. Ghost Rider has emerged, but the world isn't ready for her yet." Spector nodded. "She's brilliant, but one misstep and exposure could spiral. Media, authorities, military inquiries, everything could escalate rapidly. Yet watching her, it's clear, she's still Ghost Rider. Every movement, every decision perfect." Emily's mind raced, weighing every option, every potential outcome. Debriefing meant exposure, questions, scrutiny. It meant her past would collide with her present in a way she could not control, yet she had no choice. Ghost Rider's legend was alive, witnessed, and acknowledged. She had survived the impossible. Now she had to navigate the consequences. The helicopters began shuttling passengers to temporary triage, emergency crews ensuring order. Emily stood on the riverbank, her hands relaxed but ready, eyes scanning the mountains and sky. The F-22s remained above, circling silently, guardians and witnesses at once. The world had seen her skill, her calm under impossible pressure, and her past had resurfaced. Ghost Rider was no longer invisible. Hawkeye's voice came again, calm but deliberate. Ghost Rider, maintain position. Civilian rescue in progress. Your skill has been verified and recognized. Debriefing protocol will follow. Emily keyed the mic, her voice steady. Understood. Passengers safe, aircraft stable, awaiting debriefing instructions. Ghost Rider standing by. A hush fell over the riverbank as the rescue teams worked. Passengers whispered among themselves, some still trembling, others staring in awe at the plane that had landed so miraculously. Emily's gaze flicked to the Raptors, their silent presence reminding her that recognition had consequences far beyond this valley. Mark whispered, voice tense, "Emily, are we going to be okay?" She allowed herself a small, resolute smile. "We're alive, that's step one. Everything else we face as it comes. Stay focused on the passengers, that's all we can control." The helicopters continued shuttling passengers to safety, and Emily observed, calculating contingencies. The world above had witnessed Ghost Rider, and with recognition came scrutiny, responsibility, and expectations she could not evade. Her life as a civilian pilot was over. The past had returned. Hawkeye's voice broke the silence once more. "Ghost Rider, passengers accounted for. Aircraft stable. Your skill is extraordinary. Recognition has occurred. Prepare for follow-up protocols, including debriefing and coordination with authorities." Emily's jaw tightened. She had saved lives. She had performed the impossible. And now the acknowledgement above the river confirmed the truth she had long hidden. Her secret identity, Ghost Rider, was no longer safe. The collision of past and present was inevitable. She took a deep breath, hands steady on the controls, and allowed herself a rare moment of clarity. Flight 782 was stable. The passengers were alive. Ghost Rider had returned. And now the real test began. Emergency personnel approached her cautiously, guided by the F-22's oversight, but clearly aware that the pilot before them was extraordinary. Reporters would arrive, authorities would demand answers, and the military would undoubtedly investigate. Emily's secret, once carefully hidden, was now exposed. She was Ghost Rider, seen, recognized, and impossible to ignore. Hawkeye and Spectre observed silently above, wings slicing the sky. Their presence was both reassurance and reminder. Recognition carried consequences. The world had witnessed Ghost Rider, and now it would never forget. Emily glanced at the passengers one final time, their relief palpable, their trust in her absolute. She allowed herself a small, bitter smile. She had saved them. She had performed the impossible. She had survived. But above, the F-22s reminded her that recognition was only the beginning. Ghost Rider was back, visible to the world, and nothing would ever be the same. The helicopters lifted off, carrying the passengers to safety, emergency crews coordinating efficiently. Emily remained on the riverbank for a moment, taking in the mountains, the river, and the sky. The Raptors circled above, silent watchers, acknowledging her skill and her identity. Ghost Rider had returned. The impossible had been achieved. Lives had been saved. And yet, Emily knew that the collision between past and present, the reckoning with recognition, and the exposure of Ghost Rider would define everything that came next. She took one last deep breath, steadying herself. Flight 782 was safe. The passengers were alive. The river shimmered beneath the sun, and above the sky watched closely, silently marking the return of Ghost Rider, a legend reborn.